Hey y'all, it's Sarah, and for this week I am playing with a garden scene kind of set of doodles. I'm not sure how far I'm going to take it, but I at least wanted to share a couple of them. I'm sorry, I've been a little behind on getting some out. I had a kitchen incident with a slicing mandolin, if any of you guys know what that is. It was pretty gross. I didn't want it showing up on video, so I've had to wait for it to heal out. I'm finally good, so I can share with you. So let's go ahead and get started. If you're familiar, I usually mark out a place for my weather tracker, a place for my hydration tracker, and a place for meal planning. So I want to go ahead and mark those things out. In order to do that, I usually just use some kind of straight edge and go straight in with a marker. This time I'm choosing a really neutral marker color or a highlighter, just to kind of stay. I don't have a color theme for this since it is garden and there's going to be a lot of different colors on here. I don't really have a theme this week, so I'm just going with something really neutral. This is almost like a gray-green highlighter, and I've been asked about doing this with my markers. Try not to put too much pressure against your straight edge with your marker tip. I don't use the same marker every week to do this, so I'm not damaging really any one marker, I don't think. So far, I haven't noticed that it's causing me any problems, but like I said, I'm not using any one same marker every week. I try to keep it in a singular stroke when I do it across. That way it almost looks printed. When you kind of stop or hesitate, you get your little marker spots. So if you can do it in one smooth stroke, you're better off. If you're not comfortable doing it this way, you might want to tape it off with some washi tape. I've gotten pretty comfortable with just going in and whipping that out. This is a really good way to divide up a spread like this. And you can see this is a really faint color. But you can see that when you just keep that line consistent, it almost looks like it's printed on there. And as far as measurements go, I kind of stick to the same scale, about a ½ inch for my weather tracker and my meal planner, and then maybe close to an inch of a space here for my hydration. But that depends on you and how big or small you write. I tend to write large, so I try to give myself enough room. That's not always the case, but I try to. And let's see. I want to share this little tip after any time that you use a straight edge or a stencil or whatever with your marker. If you can see that, I sprayed just a cloth down with a little rubbing alcohol, and that'll usually clean that off really good so that you don't transfer it to other markers, or when you go to use it again, it can sometimes mix the ink across your lines. So that's a really good way to do it. I think mine is, I don't know, I keep a bottle like this handy. I think mine is like 90%, but any rubbing alcohol will work to clean up your supplies. The reason I wanted to make sure that was really cleaned off, my straight edge, is because I'm about to use this really pale. I've done worn the number off of this. I think that says 106, but just a really pale tan kind of color. And I'm just going to run a single straight line. I think I'm going to use this middle section right here. Normally I start on the weekends, but the way that I'm setting this one up, I think I should be able to write all around any of my little garden icons. So I'm going to start in this middle section, but keep in mind how you might be planning out your week. And this color at the moment, until I add much to it, is so pale, I'm not even sure you guys can see. It is a super pale color. And I'm going to do that on both sides. And if you notice, I wasn't even putting this tip up against that edge on this particular one. So that's where I started out, just some kind of tan color along that line. And let's get started on some doodles. Okay, so like I said, I typically do most of my doodle art kind of on my weekend column here or somewhere in between the space, because I don't write as much for my weekends as the things I try to keep up with during the week. We're kind of a lazy weekend family, so I get more room to scribble all over there. That's where I'm going to start, but you decide whatever works. I've got a couple. You can go lots of directions. I told you guys I'm not super picky about markers or enforcing colors or anything like that. Pick you something in the tan range. And I'm going to come right on this area over here and try to gauge where the center, actually, you know what? I'm going to go off to the side a little bit. That'll still give me room to write on these dates if I want to. I'm coming back in with my straight edge and just some kind of tan color. I'm using a chisel tip for this just because it's going to make doing these posts or these stakes a little easier, I think, to me. So here we go. And I know these colors are super faint. We're going to build on the color. They're super faint, so I'm not sure if it's going to be a little difficult for you guys to see as I'm starting out, but as I continue, hopefully you'll be able to see the details a little better. I'm basically trying to create a triangle that's going to cross over at the top. And something along those lines. I'll get a little closer here. Go a little closer, maybe you can see. So something along those lines. And I might actually do that a couple times as I go across in a couple different places, but I'll start there so you can kind of see where we're going with this. First thing I'm going to do is come down here and give it like a little bump. A squiggly little bump. No big deal. I can go ahead and come in with my straight edge and outline these. And I'm going to bring in a different straight edge for the moment just because it's easier to maneuver. You guys can see I've had this thing for years, so many years. I've had it like 20 years, which is why it's yellow. But they do sell these ones or similar to it online. I tried to order a new one that was not so yellowed out. I found that on Amazon. I'm going to show you the difference, why I still love this one. This one, this faded out one, it is almost like credit card thickness, where this one's almost like ruler thickness, so it's a lot thicker. For some reason, I like this little flimsier one. I'm just going to go in and outline both of these posts. When you're outlining your stakes, and I'm just going to call these tomato stakes at the moment because I think that's what's going on. This one is tomato. When you get to this point, you want to leave them crossing over. So you're not going to draw the line straight through on one side of your stakes. Doesn't matter which stake you choose. Just cross them over. And I'm just going to try to close that top off a little bit. I didn't even do anything spectacular with it. I just kind of closed it off. And I'm just going to bring some lines across there like they're tied together. that's about it. I'm not taking this too far. While I have this little straight edge here, you can do it this way or you can just do it by hand, and I'll do it both. I'm dragging my pen, and I'm just using this Dollar Tree Click Click ballpoint pen. I like these because it's very similar when you're drawing with a pencil. And the more pressure you put down or the less pressure you put down, you'll get a different result. These pens work very much that way. So I get a lot of different line options with just this pen. I might come in and do a little swirly in there. And just scratch some lines up and down. So I said you can do it freehand or you can do it with your straight edge. If you don't feel like you can keep inside that little stick with your flicks, use your straight edge to help you. I did another little swirly kind of thing there. So that's where we're at so far. I might come under here now and go ahead and I'm tapping in and squiggling in just some little marks, and I'll get closer so you can see. Okay, maybe you can see that. I'm not doing anything in particular. I'm actually just tapping it down, changing my pressure, and moving along, and it just leaves various broken lines across there. So this is to kind of mimic our ground or our dirt now at this point. Now that I've come over here, I might alternate it a little bit and do a little squiggly hump upwards. Just a little bump like that. Same thing. I'm just going to keep going across doing not even anything consistent. Okay, let's wait for it to focus for a moment. There it goes. So I'm going to keep doing that all the way across and just doing different mounds, basically. And none of them are perfect. You don't need consistency on this right here. And we'll just keep going across. So that's where I am so far. I think we've got a good start to some flower beds or garden beds. This tan is basically somewhere in the same range as that one. I'm barely going to put a little bit of it there. Not even doing a good job. Let's look closer at that. Okay, maybe you can see I'm just putting a little bit of color there. There's still a little white on those mounds. There's some slightly darker color. I just scratched it on there, and I might even do that underneath here in my little dirt spots under my stake. So let's zoom out. I'm going to do the same thing on both pages. Okay, maybe that'll give you an idea of what you're looking at this point. So I might take another shade of tan-ish and come in on this lower section of my stakes, the inside part of it, and drag that down a little bit. So I've got a couple colors going in that wood grain there. You don't have to take it any further than this. You could take it further than this. I'm going to share this little tidbit here. I probably should do a video specifically just about this particular marker. So I'm thinking this was a Dollar Tree set. I'm pretty sure this was out of a Dollar Tree set. And this particular set didn't work super well on my Happy Planner paper. It bled through, and somehow when this one got stored, the lid was loose on it and it started to dry out. This brown started to dry out. And I almost tossed it, and I realized this may be one of my favorite markers, because now that it's dried out like that, it only lays just bits of ink. I grabbed a piece of paper just so I can show you. Can you see that? That is a marker that is dried out. Now, if I put some heavy pressure on it, I might get something like that. But in this brown color, this has been one of my favorite little cheat tools because it fades out as you slide across with it, since it is drying out. It only applies like a minimal amount. So it's like it does shadow work for you. I would almost suggest investing in one of the little Dollar Tree packs of markers like this and leaving the lid off for several days and letting this become a shading and shadowing tool, because you'll be surprised, one, how often you can use this. I use it for oranges, for reds, and for browns to add shadow and shading to it, and it kind of does all the work for me since it fades out on its own. I don't actually have to sit and do multiple colors. If you can look and see how well it did that. So that's one of my little cheating tricks, is this faded out marker, and I'm sure I'll let another one dry out like that once that one's finally worn out. But that's one of my little cheats. Let's do a couple other wooden stakes here. So where might I want to put one? I'm not even sure. I know the concept I wanted to use. I didn't necessarily lay out the design yet. So maybe I'll come over here with my straight edge. And instead of doing the stakes in the triangle type form, I'm just going to do one straight line on this one. And you can edge it right up against the edge. That way you still have plenty of room to write. And we'll do the same thing with this one as we did with the triangular one. We're just going to outline it and add a little color to it, add some lines to it, make it kind of look wood-like. And I'm going to do the same thing. Maybe put some little swirly doodles in there and drag some light lines down. Now, I want to pull it really close so I can kind of show you this marker a little better. Maybe that's close enough. I'm going to just take this marker, and just to help me keep it pretty even. Well, it didn't, because I slid over anyway. So I'm just going to pull it down some. And you can kind of see at this bottom area, I might put a little more pressure on this dried out marker, so I get a hair darker color. But now you can see it added a whole lot more dimension without me doing a whole lot of work. So that's one of my little cheaty hacks. I need to let a black one do the same thing to dry out and test it out and see. So if you're using, if you're trying that and maybe it didn't blend out good, give it a second and come back over with your lighter color and help it blend in. If you feel like it was didn't go well, if it didn't lay down super well. But for the most part, I think I like how that turned out. Let's zoom back out a hair. Now, I've told you guys before, the reason that I bounce all over, one is a little ADHD, but that benefits me because that allows me to put a whole lot more ink on my page without any concerns of bleeding through. Because I get asked that a lot with all the coloring and stuff that I have on my pages. Does it bleed through? This is how I get away with it, is because I bounce all over like a distracted toddler, and it gives that ink just enough time, or that layer just enough time to dry, so I can go on to the next one and then go back to that and add even more color. So I'm going to start with this one here, and at the bottom I'm going to swing up and maybe come to this side and overlap it. Maybe I'll pull behind there again and then overlap that. And just finish it off up there. Basically the same thing with this other side. I'm just going to do it up both sides of this tomato trellis or these stakes or whatever you want to call them. So that's pretty much what I've got. I'll do the same thing with just the singular one. I came up like that. Try to figure out where it would start over here. And that's all I did. I'm going to come in now with some kind of green colors. So I'm using highlighters for this. I just got these in. I shared about getting these in. If you like some of the softer muted colors, this was a Mr. Pen collection, and these kind of, I'm not going to say they're pastels. Now, I know they look in the package like they're pastels. They're not really pastels. They're almost like dusty colors. Almost like they all have gray undertones, because some of the colors actually get pretty dark. This color right here goes into like almost a deep dusty rose or mauve color. And a couple of the other colors are pretty pigmented. They're a light pigmented, but they all have kind of gray undertones to them, or dusty undertones to them. If you're curious about this set, these are really close to my Zayar set. They have a nice chisel tip, and I'm fixing to use this chisel tip to my advantage. And I'm not sure how to explain what I'm going to do, but I kind of want to point that tip whatever direction that I want my leaf to start, and then drag it a little bit at an angle. So let's see if I can show you what I mean. So it almost gives me this diamond. And that seems a little geometric at the moment, but it's okay. When I outline it, I'm going to soften that. So wherever you might want a leaf. And if you notice in some places, I'm not dragging that point all the way to the vine. There's maybe a little gap there. I'm just going to throw a stem to those leaves in those gap areas. I want to leave a little space because I want to think about where I'm putting these. I want to add my veggies to this, or my tomatoes to this. And I'm going to spin my angles so I can keep this tip at the direction. I'm not very consistent with leaves. I'm not consistent with anything. I use the tools to help with that a lot. So this honestly is a big help doing smaller leaves and helping me keep the size and shape pretty close together. Where I ended this little stringy part up here, I'm going to try to get some on it. Okay, I feel like that might be a good amount of leaves. And I'm going to do basically the same thing on the little single stem. You can switch out colors that you're using. And this one has a little bit of a different tip. So it doesn't work quite as easy for that as maybe the chisel tip. But I'm just going to cheat and use this same green on this side, since I have it handy and it does have the chisel tip. And if you just look at it right now, I don't necessarily have to outline any of those leaves. I don't have to do anything else to them. Your brain now has the concept that they're leaves. And that start and stop point of doing this little angle gives a little extra color. You see what I mean? Like where it drops that little bit of ink right at your lift point. So now it looks like even on these little itty bitty teeny tiny leaves that there's multiple tones. Like it looks like there's dimension. And if you wanted bigger leaves, I'm gonna reach over. If you wanted some bigger leaves, try one of your wider chisel tips. I'm not going to use that one. It's pretty pale, but I do love the color green that's in this one, in this Mr. Pen set. I feel like I want to add some, even though I don't have any vines there, I might want to add. So there we go. Now let's add some fruit. Right about here, I'm just going to do a little squiggly here for the top of my tomato, and some kind of little squiggly here, just to tell me where the top of my tomato is going to be. I'm coming in with this Crayola Super Tip, and I'm going to tell you, I don't know what color it's going to appear. This almost looks like a deep, deep salmon color on the lid. Like, not quite red, not quite pink. That's what the lid looks like. It's not quite red. It's like a pinkish color. A little. But I'm starting with that lighter shade because all I'll have to do is layer over this one again. Instead of starting in with red, because you think tomatoes and you think red, instead of starting in with just a red and trying to figure out how to highlight it, I started in with this kind of lighter shade of this pinkish red. And then I'm going to give it a second, because we all know red has a tendency, or reds, anything in that red range, has a tendency to want to bleed through. So this is kind of helping me prevent that. I'm going to come right in here where I did the little green squiggly and just kind of do something like that across the top of that tomato to look like leaves. And there we go. I'm going to give that a second to set so that, like I said, I don't bleed any red through. Let's go ahead and start on some of our other little garden mounds here. And I'm going to rotate out some of the things that I do. So right here, I might start with just coming up. And I'm going to get a little closer because this is going to be tiny. Okay. I'm just going to come up really lightly and swoop around like that. And like that. And there's a plant with some new growth. This is pretty simple. I'll throw a green color on there. This is a little more of a limey green color. I don't know. It's Crazy Art doesn't have theirs labeled. Neither do the Super Tips. The Michael's version, though, theirs are labeled. I might come on this one and swing up like that. Drag a few lines across there. And maybe a kind of a curve. And I'm just going to drag that up. Usually I go in and start things with markers. So something like that, I would have just came in and pulled up the green and then just outlined it. But however you want to do your carrots. I just have a slightly orangey color. This is out of that Mr. Pen collection. They're not labeled either as far as colors go. I don't know if the package tells. No, there's nothing on the package. I have to tell y'all though, because it's not the first time I've ordered from them. And I think I have it sitting somewhere else. But they threw in a little handwritten note. And that was Mr. Pen on Amazon. They threw in a little handwritten note. But also, if you're not familiar, they always give you some kind of little freebie mustache sticker or vinyl. This one's a different one than some of the other ones I've gotten. But you always get something like this. And you get a little freebie code like this. And if you go in and do this code, they'll send you another freebie in the mail. And I'm not going to tell you what those freebies usually are, but I've gotten some cute, I'll say some cute stationery items. So there's a little carrot growing. You could do multiple carrots. I am going to try, I don't know, maybe a turnip, or let's go up and do almost a similar shape as the carrot, but larger. Same thing, doing maybe the little shape up there and some flicks across. And I'll show you what I mean. A lot of times I just come in and do something like this, using the chisel tip of my marker to do a lot of the work. And then I just outline it. It's so much easier to do it that way. If you notice, I really got out of lines trying to fill in. It's much easier to trace around it, at least for me. I might come in with some shade of purple. And I'm starting with a lighter purple. I can add some darker to it later if I want to. But I only went about halfway down on that. And I'm going to come back in with some kind of light tan color. I'm just going to use the same one. And work it into that. And let's see what I've got handy in a darker purple. So I just grabbed something maybe a little bit darker and threw a little color on there. It might be easier for me to use the little pen tip. Came down in the little curve there. And so we've got like a turnip or something like that. You could do onions. You could take the really cheater route and just do a lot of green plants, like a lot of new growth plants. That's why I said the cool thing about this one is it will look like my page has had something done to it, but there will still be plenty of room to write. So if you're got a week that you're gonna need a whole bunch of space left still, this might be a fun one. I thought for this time of year, a little garden scene could be fun. So back over here to the tomatoes. I'm coming back in with that same reddish pink, salmony, I don't know. I wish they would label them. And swoop down one side. Now all of a sudden you get the idea that it is red, but now it's got some lighter and some darker, and you can always come in with a white pen. I'm using a Signo from Uniball. Maybe just throwing a few little highlights on there. You can always throw some kind of vegetable onto this one. You could make it be like a beanstalk or something. I think I'm just going to mostly leave that one greenery. But I might come on this mound right here. It's a little bit of a weird one. I'm just going to go ahead and throw another carrot in. And I'm doing the cheater thing and doing the green part with marker first. I just find that easier than filling in a small spot. So now I've got another carrot. And we've got to start. For some reason, these all remind me of, I don't know. It reminds me of Winnie the Pooh illustrations, like Friend Rabbit's Garden, maybe. And at a glance, maybe you can see what I mean. I don't know. That could just be how my brain works, being from the generation that I'm from. But I do get kind of that Winnie the Pooh garden feeling. So you can see I just kind of repeated the same steps on this side, and there's plenty of room for me to still write in all these places. Although my schedule's not as busy as some folks, I get to play a little more on mine. I'm going to slide this out of the way so that I can get to my little side area over here, and I'm using some kind of little rectangle stencil. You can certainly use a ruler to do this. And I'm going to come down, I don't know, somewhere around here. See if I can get it fairly straight. This one's, I don't know, it's maybe about 1 inch by 2 inches. Somewhere around in that. So I've got a little rectangle up there. And right about here on the sides, I'm going to drag some lines from the edge. And I'm just kind of flicking them down so that that line gets a little thinner. Let me get a little closer for you, so you can see what I mean. I'm just flicking it down, doing some shorter ones. And same thing I did with my stakes and my poles. I'm going to do some lines across. Maybe some swirls. Maybe a swirl like that, and drag little triangles down it like that. Don't take it too seriously. Just drag some lines across it. We're going to color over it. So at this point, we're kind of at a wood board. I'm going to come in with one of my tan colors again, just as the base color for this. And I've got a little color on there just to give it maybe some dimension. I'm going to use this chisel to my advantage again and come down this side, starting a little bit down up here. I came a little bit down and pulled down, and trying to keep it on a similar tilt. If you notice, I've got it tilted right here at this corner, and bring it across where they meet. And that gives me a pretty decent guide to trying to make it a little dimensional, a little 3D-ish. I'm not even sure if that's going to be the right direction, but we're just trying to get the idea of it. So with a straight edge, I'm going to follow what I did with that marker or that highlighter. And where I did it on that angle, you can see that's probably about on a 45. Oops. Probably about on a 45. I'm not really sure. It's close enough for me. I'm bringing back in my little handy dandy half dead marker here. And flick some of this color down. The cool thing about this one is it is so dry that I can come directly in and layer, where I wouldn't suggest doing that as fast with a normal brown color. But since this one is dried out, I don't have to worry about it bleeding through with it being such a dark color. So you can see how that works out for me. Because it fades out, it does so much of the detail work for me. So I'm just kind of flicking some of those lines across there. That's a pretty good wood finish to me. And right about, I don't know, mine has the dot grid on it. I'm just going to come down a little tiny hair from the bottom of that and start with some handles. Let's see, I'm going to look on my stencil real quick and see if there's any that'll help me cheat on that. No, I don't really see anything small enough. I'm going to try to wing it here. Me and straight lines, we don't always go well together. And I may have just come over a little too far. I think I needed to come over to about here instead. That's okay. That's one of those instances where I will say I leave my mistakes in, so you can see how I usually deal with them. And I'm just trying to get something close to a long skinny rectangle with two rounded ends. On something like this, if I make this kind of mistake, first of all, at least try with your eraser. That was such a faint line. Try with your eraser and lighten that up a little bit. Give it a chance, though. With a lot of pens, you could just make it worse by smearing it. A lot of people use whiteout, which is fine. I can blend whiteout in really well. But my two go-tos usually are either just my white gel pen, or Dollar Tree has this Crafter's Square. It says metallic marker. Now, every other color in this series, because they have several colors. They have blue, silver, gold, a mauve color, and then the white one at Dollar Tree. All of those are, in fact, metallic, and they have like a sheen to them. This one really just comes out white. So this is, it's a very translucent white. So you sometimes have to do it over ink a couple of times, or you might just go in with your gel pen and go over it. I usually will try to double up on them, but you can see it already improved how that looks. And it doesn't necessarily leave the texture that whiteout leaves. But I am a big fan of like the whiteout tapes and stuff. I typically can hide those fairly well. So once I have this, I want to come up here and give myself a little tiny circle. Let's see if I can do this any kind of well. All right, some kind of little circle there to look like a hook or a peg. And I'm going to come over the same way. Let's see, I'm going to use the dots to help me cheat. The end of this is here. So I want to go right about here for my other handle. And we'll try to mimic the same thing. This is also one of those instances. Sorry, I am way off on showing you. This is also one of those instances where normally I would just come in with whatever the base color and use the width of this to help me do that. That's why a lot of times you don't see me sketch things out. I go in with marker first because I really use the markers to help me, since I'm not great at straight lines. I'm not great at keeping consistent widths on things. So I'm about here at this point. Now I'm going to try to put a little tiny oval there and a little tiny oval there. I might put some kind of band here for the handle. You do these however you want to. You could do green handles like a lot of real garden tools are, but this is what I'm doing so far. I might put like a little screw hole right about there. And I'm going to darken these lines a little bit after I've gotten my sizing here. Okay, that works for me. So now that I got my little handles done, I'm just going to do my best and try to create some garden tools here. So I'm just using a gray color. It's pretty pale. I'm not sure if you can see it. So that's where I'm at that point. I'll go ahead and fill in the insides. And for this one, let's try something a little different. I'm going to come down this way, come down this way. Let's get a little closer. This is such a faint color. And down the middle, maybe you can see that. And maybe just do a little angled looking kind of claw from there. So when I go to outline this, you'll be able to see what I did just a little better. And on my little tiny shovel here, I drug those lines all the way down. And I might put some little dots around here. Maybe a little faint squiggly line up the side. And for this one, maybe you guys will be able to see this a little better. Don't mind me turning to the weird angles. This is just, sometimes I have to spin my paper 5 different directions just to get a certain line. So that's what I started with. And now I'm doing these kind of side angled. I might throw a few dots or specks in there. I'll give this a second to, right there where I changed those angles. I am way off on showing y'all. Sorry. Right where I did these angles, I just did some faint little dots there where it almost shadowed where this little claw thing turns. So now that it's had a second or so to dry, I'll come back in with my gray and darken some spots, maybe right there in the center of my shovel. Obviously, I didn't get that super straight there at the handle. So let's see if I can straighten that up a little. And that's a little better. Don't sweat it too much, because the honest truth is, once all the details are put together, no one small mistake is really all that noticeable. So that let me clean it up a little bit. I might straighten this little line out as well while I've got it here. Let's just do it. So that works for me. I'll go ahead and put a little bit of my wood graining into my handles. And you could do really cutesy. You could have made your handles pink or something if you wanted to bring in something, a fun element. I went with a little more realistic color, but you could absolutely turn this into a girly page or create a color scheme to go with it. So now that that's there, I'm going to come back in with my little cheating brown marker and drag it down one of the sides. So to look like they're hanging, I'm just going to bring in basically like a little piece of string. I'm going to bring one side up to this little knob that it's supposed to be hanging off of, and then the other side I'll start from somewhere around over here and pull it up to there. You could even tie a little knot up there, or a little bow if you wanted to. So back to my little hole there and bring it up. And now they look like they're just hanging there. Now might be a good time to go ahead and put some shadow around it. I'm just going to use this gray marker again, this really pale gray marker. It doesn't leave much of a shadow, just a hair. This is probably my favorite marker for doing shadows around things. It's a light, cool gray, and I have been finding these, because you can buy them individually at the Pop Shelf, if you guys have seen those Pop Shelves, and they have individuals. So that's what this one is, which is good because I can just get this one marker for shading and shadowing, and typically that's all I use it for, although every now and then I'll use it as a gray. But I'm just going to outline down one side, and I tried to stay to the same side of everything. So I try to stay to the right side of all my items. I'm not a stickler for the rules on how to shade and shadow and all of that. So while I've got this out, I might do the same thing to all of my little pieces here. And it's really subtle, and especially on here, it's super subtle. In person, that subtlety just kind of makes those little images pop. So I'm doing it around all my little plants, my steak, and it is so faint that I know it's probably hard to see. And just go around. And if you notice, I'm just sticking to the right side of all the edges of things. That's about as much formality as I take when it comes to shading, shadowing, and things like that. I just pick a side, stick with it, throw a little gray on there, And it's just enough detail for my eye to notice it and enjoy it. This is where I'm at on my garden page so far, on my garden doodles. And I think I'm going to add a few more little details. So I'm going to grab just a green highlighter. And the reason I'm going with the highlighter is because this chisel tip will make what I'm about to do just a hair easier, at least to me. You can use any kind of marker. I had another green marker sitting here, but I'm starting with a slightly lighter green shade. And I'm going to go, let me put some dirt down first. So I'm using this again that I used for my dirt line. And I just kind of gave myself a little line there right at the bottom of that, so I would know where my my horizon was, kind of, if you will. And right about here, I'm using the widest width for this. And I started with those two. Really, I just wanted to see how far across I could go. You could start with this layer that I'm about to do first. So I'm going to do my best to do 3 rows of this right on top of one another. Like I said, I'm doing my best. Let's get a little closer. You can kind of see where I'm at. There was a little gap. That's okay. We're good. We're good. Once I've done that, I'm going to take some kind of gray marker. Let's see what I've got close by. I'm using this one because it has the chisel tip instead of this little brush tip one I was using. So I'm going to use this one just because it'll bump up against there nicely and easily. And so I just basically did kind of a little gray square at the end of those 2 green spots. Now I'm going to come in and right about here, I just kind of bumped around each one of those ends, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I bumped around each of those ends. You can kind of see where this is going. I might go in here instead of coming straight across, since I'm made a little ground looking area there. I'm going to go ahead and put my uneven ground. Same way I pretty much did across my garden area, just some squiggly wiggly uneven lines. Extend a line out here, extend a line out here, and we're going to come across. Simple enough. Now we've got the start of a water hose, basically. Right here on my little gray spots, I'm going to put some little notches. Maybe we need it a little closer. So a little notch right down the center. And same thing on this side. I just put 2 little notches there and kind of curled around to give it a nozzle on each end. I'm taking just a slightly darker green from this highlighter that I used. And now I don't necessarily need that chisel tip, so I can use whatever marker at this point. And I'm going to curve around, starting on one edge. I just curved around that little curvy part and pulled that straight across. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry because I'm going to come over it one more time with this color again. but I want to let it dry for a second just to make sure I don't bleed anything through. So now that these colors have had a little bit of time to dry, I'm coming back in with that same lighter green that I used originally and going back over it so that it just kind of blends them in a little better. Now that I've got that done, I think I'm going to bring in, I'm going to kind of give myself a little guide here. I'm bringing in a rectangle, and I'm not even sure what size this rectangle is, just to give you an idea. So it's 1.5 by about 1. And I think maybe I need a little more room, so let me slide this over. There we go. I think that should be about right. I'm bringing the bottom of my rectangle down to the bottom of my garden hose, and I left a little bit of space over here because I'm making a watering can, and I really want to give it enough room for my handle and my spout to come out. And now that I've sketched my square just enough for me to kind of gauge size, scale. I don't do that real often, but I thought it would be better to show it this way. I've gotten pretty decent at freehanding the watering cans, but I wanted to show a non-freehand way of doing it. So I'm just angling up maybe 1/4 of an inch over, and same thing from where the bottom of that square or rectangle would be. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And while I'm at it, let's just try to make this. Oh, no, I'll wait. So I'm just going to erase these lines really quick. I'm erasing most of the lines now. I can still see the faintness of it. But to me, it's easier to erase before you start putting ink over it, because sometimes once you get ink over something that you've penciled in, it's really a little more difficult to get it to erase, at least from what I have found with most of the inks that I'm using. I'm taking this light gray again. Any gray you want to use. I'm actually going to use 2 different grays, I think. And I'm coming from where that penciled edge is and sliding these marks about halfway across. I'm not even doing them even. Honestly, if you wanted a good reflection, you might want to keep this part lined up. However, I tend to do it uneven, even though I know that reflection or that light area would probably go straight down. I don't know. I just do it this way. So from both sides, I came in and just left some white space. And right about now, I'm just going to come straight across that top using the tip of my marker so it gives me a rim I can play with in a minute. And I'm going to draw like a letter C. And let's pull up a spout. So I just came down from that side, and I'm going to come across and just do a little line down. I know that's really faint. When I outline it, you'll see it a little better. Now I can come in and I'm using my straight edge. I could have probably done it without using a straight edge. Let's see, can I? Let's try this other side. I can always go over it if I don't do a good job. I'm just outlining where I did my marker. And I'll probably darken this outline, I'm sure. So right here on this edge where I used that tip, I'm just curving around those two parts. I might swing part of a line there. And across the top. Mine's a little crooked, but I think I'm okay with it. Right here, I'm just going to start a little lower than where that handle comes to, just to bring it a little deeper. And I'm doing my best to stay within that spacing. That's why I do my marker first. I'm not sure I would have gotten those lines the correct thickness if I didn't outline the marker part. So those are kind of cheats that I take a lot of times. Right here, I'm going to do my best to do a little oval. I'm not sure if you can see, mine ends up meeting right to this line. So I'm going to try to do my oval into this line and then maybe a half of a little circle around there. And I can darken this line a little. So it looks like a watering can to me. I'm going to come in and kind of almost a slight curve of flicking some lines. And turn your paper if you have to. Some motions feel a little more natural that way, I think. Now, one way to do it is where your marker lines, when we stacked them right here, you can use those as a guide to swing across. And then maybe throw a few little ones in there. And I might do a few less on this side. I don't know why, just to be that way. And I think I will drag a few up like that. And the same with the handle. Right in that curve, I'm dragging a few little lines up. Maybe right about there. And I could even swing one or two through there. I might even come in with those little light scribbles like that. A little dot or two. Metal has some texture to it. I'm going to come put some dots over here in my spout. And I think I do want to darken a couple of these lines up. So that edge is slightly darker, that line's slightly heavier. I might try to fix this curve on here, but you know what? I'm not too stressed about it. Throw a few lines there, and I think that helps my little curve. This is where I said I would probably end up using two different gray colors. That one gray is pretty faint, even if you layer it on top of one another. Usually I just tell you, give it time, layer it, and you don't need multiple tones of a color. But in this instance, I am going to use two different ones. So I've just got this darker highlighter that I'm taking down that side, probably down through there. And maybe partially down this part and maybe along there. And right about there on the rim, I might do a little here on my spout, around the edge of my spout. And we've got a little watering can sitting there by the hose, or a giant watering can. I don't do things to scale. I do them for fun. And I'm learning while I do it, so that's always part of the excitement for me. So I'm just looking at this. Like I said, I had some ideas. I didn't have it mapped out in my head yet. And I'm thinking maybe I want to, I don't know, I'm going to throw something here into my watering can. Because why not? I'm not even sure what I'm putting there. How about we start with a little greenery? Let's see, what color green? I kind of like to mix greens myself. I like to have a couple variations on something like this, but you don't have to. You could use the same green over and over and just keep it very even, but I'm just coming in with a green and maybe putting some leaf-like somethings. And really, if you look, it's almost like making little hearts on here. Maybe just one at the top. So if you think about it as just doing little tiny hearts, I think that makes it fairly easy to get your brain doing them consistent. So I'm doing the hearts all the way up the stem and then just one little something at the top. And you notice the lift and like the start and stop points with pretty much any of the marker on this paper is going to leave that darker where the ink sets for just a moment. And the cool thing about that is it usually kind of works into most of the things that I play with, like with my leaves and things like that. So it makes it look like there's more effort put into adding different tones to it than we really had to do. So keeping that same idea about going in with a heart, I'm just going to outline these. And now they look like they've got a couple tones to them. You don't have to outline all of them. You could just outline maybe the bottom section of each one. So that's what I'm going to do. Is some of them I outlined it fully, and then the others look a little more faint. I feel like I could even add a few more in there. Normally I keep a tracker right here, but I figured this time I might just put my tracker down this direction, if you guys have seen some of my other ones. But I kind of wanted to build that little scene there, and there wasn't really a lot of places I could put that much and that much height. So this is where I'm sitting at this point. You could repeat these elements all over the place. I am considering, since I don't need much room here, I might throw another element like this one on this side to balance it. And I did want to share, if you saw my my doodle a day that I do for my monthly, I did something similar to this. So I'm going to go ahead and do one on here because those go really quickly and there's no explanation to them. They're just like 30-second videos. So somewhere around right here, I think, I'm going to try to fit in a little garden sign. And I'm going to use my straight edge. And I'm putting mine on a tilt. You could go straight up and down with it. So I've kind of got my stick, or my stake, or whatever you want to consider that. And using the marker to my advantage, I'm going to go ahead and try to get some straight lines across there, or as straight as I can get them. I'm not doing them super even. This one is very forgiving. It can be cattywampus. It can be all kinds of crooked and lopsided. I'm making this one rather rustic looking. I do think that I need to fill in right there though. So I'm going to go ahead and outline this the same way that I kind of did with my stakes. I want to straighten, I think I need to straighten out my stake a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to do the little swirly things like that. Maybe just drag that one up, make it easy. Just going to drag a line across here. If it's crooked, great. If it's rounded off, great. Pull some lines down off of it. And I don't think I'm even going to try to use a straight edge to get this super straight looking. Like I said, this one's going to look very rustic. So there we go. Now where each of those marker sections, as my strokes went across, I'm going to grab right at that edge and drag down, right at that edge and drag down. Same thing on this side. Now those places where you did or didn't line up super great across there are being helpful to guide you. And I'm just going rather crooked. And you can maybe see. Dipping in a little bit. Maybe notch a little V kind of look in there. Now I can do, just like I do with the other fake wood look, I'm going to drag some really faint lines across this one because I think for the most part I'm going to keep this sign relatively light colored. It's already got some color tones to it. I would come in right about here and darken that up. And possibly along some of those edges, but not too much. I think I like it in this lighter, tan. You could come in and add a little dot right here and a dot right here, like nail holes. And you've got a pretty cute garden sign. I'm going to do my best to try to put garden on here. I'm just using one of the Papermate flares for this. One of the things I can suggest, because my handwriting is not great, if you already don't have consistent handwriting, use that as a kind of a gimmick on your page. So, because I know I would not necessarily get the letters all perfectly the same size, I'm going to intentionally make them all different. So that's pretty cute to me. You could have used you could do the same idea and use this little sign to write in like you would any of your sticker squares or something like that. So if you've got an important date, think about that. You might could throw it in as an intention grabber, if you will. So while I've got it there, I'm going to go ahead and bring in this light gray again. And just run it right about like that. So far, this is where I'm at, and I'm kind of loving it. I haven't done a whole scene like this, I think, for a while. So I'm kind of loving it. While I was sitting here looking at it and thinking about what else I might want to add, because I keep a little notebook to the side of knowing what things I need to put on my calendar, I decided I think I want to try to add some height here somehow. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try to line it up. Well, no, I think I'm going to put mine here, but you can always line it up closest to the edge of here, the same way I did this, so you still have plenty of room. I'm putting it right down here because I think I can write around it. So I have not practiced doing a big shovel, just the little one. Let's see how this goes. I'm just going to come up and around. I think that's okay. I'm going to drag that down. And since I have this marker out, I'm going to go ahead and fill in. No particular way. I'm just trying not to overlap too much right at this point. Now I can come in. I'm just going to use this same marker since it's got that nice chisel tip. And let's see if I can get some kind of alignment here. And I'm just going to bring a handle up a couple of inches. I hope that's to scale or somewhere near it. Doing the same thing as with everything else, especially this. I definitely don't think I can get a line this length very straight, so I'm using a straight edge. One of the things that I don't know if you're noticing, part of the reason I like going this route is that most of my chisel tips are about the width of this little short line section from there to there. So it makes it very easy. Where this stops right here, I'm lining up, and it keeps me pretty consistent with widths. These are just cheating things that I use to help me along. I'm going to try to give us some kind of rounded top. Let's do the same right about there. And I'm going to extend this down to the edge of my little shovel blade. So right about there. And I think I want to continue this down with a little dot. Something like that. I might even use my straight edge to kind of guide that dotting, line dragging, whatever you want to call that. There's some dots and just some dragging of those lines. Almost to a point like that. And then let's see if I can get this curve coming around. I think this works for me. I might come in with some of these little jagged lines around the edge. I'll go ahead and put some wood graining up in the handle, Just drag some lines down. Maybe even a knot hole there. I feel like this edge could use a little improvement on the line. There we go. So not too bad. I do think I will come in with my dried out brown and sweep around this one. So you can see now why I kind of love this. I might even do it right there just a little bit. I love this faded marker. It just, it's one of my favorite little cheats to get this kind of wood grain look without really knowing what I'm doing. So while I'm right over in this area, I think I might add a little bit of another gray. And something like that, perhaps. Now, I'll likely go in again with that light gray that I used to draw it and kind of add one more layer. So I'll give that a second. And I think I'll come up this part of the handle and just add a line there. I feel like it might need a little dark color down around the ground. So while I'm doing that, that makes me think I might need to make the dirt a little dirtier right there. So I'm going to darken that dirt a little bit. Yeah, I think I like it with the dirt darkened around it. So I'm going to give this a second to dry. While the things that I'm waiting to dry here are drying, I'm going to go ahead and run back in and throw some shadow on these items that I added here. I'm just going down one side, maybe inside the handle, maybe even under a leaf or two. And I can go ahead and do it around the edge of my shovel here. Oh my goodness. I'm absolutely loving this. I don't know if you guys are, but I'm totally loving this. I think I want to add more. But my more is likely going to be a repeat of elements. I'm going to finish out the shovel with you, then I'll come back in and do some of my squares. If you've ever seen any of my other videos, I just use a square stencil. You could absolutely just measure it out with rulers or whatever it is that you need space to write in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that part. When I jump to the finish, you guys will see like the before the pen kind of finished product for me. Now that this has had a little bit of time, I'm going to come in once more and just drag it along the edges of where I put that little bit of darker gray, maybe there too. So I feel like that gives it a little bit of dimension. And it does make me think I could totally come in, and I think it makes me want to. So I'm going to do that with you really quick. Right about here, I think I'm just going to something like that. Dragging a little line across it. Maybe some lines downwards, and maybe another smaller one right beside it. So, I don't know, I think you'd find rocks in a garden. You would here where I live. It is a very rocky area. So I'm coloring it in basically the same way in the same colors that I just used for that shovel, because it inspired me to do so. And I just used that lighter gray here where I did my lines. I might come in with that darker gray and maybe along that bottom and a little bit around the edge. Like I said, I don't know the technicals of this part, of the actual where you're supposed to shade things. I just give the illusion that something like that is there. Now is usually the point I come in if I'm going to do any shiny things or anything shiny on my items. I've got my Signo, and I think really the only thing that I've got to do that with at this point is maybe the little highlights on my tomatoes. I'm doing just kind of the lip of this can. I could even do a little on my water hose here. Maybe on the nozzle. Nothing major. It's just putting the idea there. I could even do one somewhere on my shovel. I think I'm just going to do it on the handle portion. So right about there. Oh my goodness, I've had so much fun with this. I know this video is long and I'm really sorry. And unless you're one of those ones that just like to hang out and do your page while I'm doing mine. So for those of you that do that, I'm glad you're here. But I've just had a lot of fun with this. Maybe you can find some ideas here to add to yours or to enhance something. All of these little elements would be cute, added to a lot of the stickers I've seen out there. So you could do a little of both. I think I may add another element like this over here, but anything else I add from this point will just be a repeat, and I'll come back shortly with my finished spread, and hopefully it gives you some ideas. I've got to go in and add my weather, which I think is going to be so cute on here since there's already a garden, and all my little weather doodles will look pretty cute up there in the sky. Let me get that done and get right back with y'all. I added a few things that I needed to add, just some squares and a little pattern in them. I did a little gingham and some stripes and a few other things. I'm sure I'll be adding more to this, but this is pretty much my before the pen, before I get to adding all the things I need to add. This is probably where I'll stop at this point. But maybe it gave you some ideas. I think all of these can be used in different ways. I think it turned out pretty cute. I'm going to get a little closer. You can see the details. You can see that there's still plenty of room to write. Now, I should say, in case you can't tell, I'm using the big, but you can always adapt these to a classic size or anything else. That's all I have for you. I hope to see you soon. I know this was long, but there was a lot of small things to this one. The only thing that I wanted to mention, I did go back in and add a few more sprigs here. I thought it was a little bare, so I went ahead and added a few more little sprigs there, but otherwise, that's it. I hope you enjoyed hanging out. I really enjoy hanging out and sharing my excitement because I'm still learning. And I think a lot of these are things that once you see the steps or you kind of see an idea, that makes it easier. These are a whole lot easier to pull off than what